A young mother in Manhattan is under arrest. She's charged with the murder of her own daughter.
Medical workers say the child's body was in such horrifying condition, they will never ever be able to forget this case.
29-year-old Awilda Lopez proclaimed her innocence tonight, but police say she is a brutal killer who systematically tortured her own daughter to death.
Well, in my 22 years of service, this has been the worst case of child abuse that I have ever witnessed.
The detective's words would haunt New York City. But who was the child at the center of this tragedy? And what did she do to get all this? Elisa Izquierdo was born in February 1989 at Woodhull Hospital, Brooklyn, to a mother addicted to crack cocaine. Due to which, Elisa herself was born addicted, prompting hospital staff to alert child welfare authorities immediately. Full custody was therefore granted to her father. Even after all odds, she grew up into a sweet, bright, and loving child. Her father, Gustavo Izquierdo, was a Cuban immigrant who worked multiple jobs to provide for his family. He was a devoted father who adored his daughter and gave her the kind of love every child deserves. He used to call her his princess and enrolled her in a prestigious Montessori preschool, where her charm and intelligence captivated everyone. It was there that she caught the attention of Prince Michael of Greece, a patron of the school, who was so taken with the little girl that he offered to finance her entire private school education through college. The prince would send her gifts at Christmas, Easter, and on her birthdays. Elisa's future looked bright and full of promise. While she had the best father, her mother was the complete opposite. Awilda Lopez carried a troubled past and struggled with drug addiction. She had 5 other children from previous relationships. All of them had already been removed from her care by Child Protective Services. Gustavo wanted sole custody of Elisa, but in the early 1990s, courts often believed a child should never be kept away from her mother, no matter the circumstances. So despite Awilda's history, the court granted her unsupervised visitation rights for every weekend. But the nightmare began immediately. Both Gustavo and Elisa's teachers noticed she returned from these weekend visits bearing bruises and other signs of physical abuse. One day, while bathing her, Gustavo noticed bruising around Elisa's genitals. The little girl would often become sick after returning from her mother's apartment. In 1992, Gustavo filed a petition in family court, desperately pleading with the judge to terminate Awilda's visitation rights completely. But his pleas were ignored, and the court allowed the visits to continue. But knowing how Awilda could be dangerous for her, Gustavo planned to leave the country and return with Elisa to his native Cuba. He even purchased airline tickets for May 26, 1994. But fate had other plans. That same month, Gustavo was hospitalized with severe breathing problems and was diagnosed with lung cancer. On May 26th, the very day he had planned to escape with Elisa, Gustavo died, leaving 5-year-old Elisa behind with her evil mother. September 1994. 5-year-old Elisa Izquierdo moves into her mother's apartment at 510 West 51st Street in Manhattan,
where she lived with her husband Carlos Lopez and her other children.
The court believed Awilda Lopez had changed.
She got the custody of her children.
She'd completed rehab, attended parenting classes, presented herself as a woman ready for a second chance. But the warnings began almost immediately. Within weeks, teachers at Elisa's school noticed something was wrong. The bright, lively child they'd known under her father's care was changing.
She arrived at school dull and lifeless. Her spark was no more. The girl who once charmed a European prince had become a shadow of herself.
Then came the bruises, small ones at first, on her arms, her legs. When teachers asked, Elisa would look down and say nothing, or she'd repeat whatever explanation her mother had given her, like she fell down or bumped into a table. Her behavior suggested fear.
One of her classmates recalled about the bruises she saw.
She had black and blue, a lot right here, a lot right here, and a little bit on her face. She didn't say nothing about her bruises and stuff.
The school reported their concerns regarding abuse to the Manhattan Child Welfare Authorities. The CWA replied that their concerns were not reportable due to a lack of evidence of abuse. Neighbors in the apartment building where Elisa lived with her mother and stepdad recalled hearing some troubling noises through the wall, especially at night. Sounds like loud bangs, then a crying child, but not the ordinary cry of a child.
I heard a lot of noises in that apartment. That's what I'm saying. It's not what I saw, but what I used to hear at night. Because I heard noises in that apartment that were not normal. So, but there was nothing that I could pinpoint, because you couldn't actually see it. You just hear it. It's two different things. And then silence, and then silence. And I said, God, thank God, now I could sleep a little bit. This would go on at least 2 or 3 times a week.
Between September 1994 and November 1995, the Administration for Children's Services received report after report about Elisa Izquierdo. Not 1, not 2, at least 22 documented calls. Teachers, social workers, and even the school principal raised concern with child welfare authorities. Each time, caseworkers were supposed to investigate. They either didn't show up or accepted Awilda's explanations without question. One caseworker noted in her file, "Mother seems cooperative. Home appears adequate." Meanwhile, the signs of abuse grew worse with each passing day. Elisa now weighed barely 40 pounds, her hair torn out in patches, walking with a limp, urinating in her uniform and covered in bruises from head to toe. When teachers saw her in this condition, they made one final desperate call on the 17th of November 1995.
Exactly saying these words.
"This child is in serious danger. We believe she is being severely abused. If someone doesn't intervene, this child is going to die." Just a few weeks later, Elisa was withdrawn from school. She was not allowed to dine with her step-siblings or even watch TV. She sometimes urinated and defecated in her room, the filth trickling into apartments below. Neighbors recalled that the family was rarely seen, and the stepfather was never spotted taking the children to school that semester.
I always see him take the kids to school in the morning, about 8 o'clock. But this school semester, I didn't see too much of the children or the family.
November 22nd, 1995. Thanksgiving Eve. For most families in New York, it was a time of preparation. Turkey in the oven, family gathering, gratitude. But for Elisa Izquierdo, time was running out. That night, neighbors heard nothing. The silence that followed weeks of violent sounds was the stillness of tragedy. Earlier that evening, Awilda called her sister Mercy Torres, saying that the girl was like retarded on the bed, leaking fluid from her nose and mouth, unable or unwilling to eat or drink. The sister pleaded to take her to the hospital. Awilda simply replied, "I'll think about it after I finish the dishes." According to witness accounts and Alwaida's later confession, an argument erupted inside the home, during which Elisa was struck with such force that she collapsed. Medical experts would later testify that the blow inflicted catastrophic damage to her brain. By the morning of November 23rd, Awilda called a neighbor, Francisco Santana, to her apartment. She was crying in distress, telling him, "I can't believe it. Tell me it's not true." When Santana arrived, he saw Elisa's small, silent body on the bed. For the next 2 hours, Santana pleaded with Awilda to call the police. Awilda refused, distraught and fearful. Finally, unable to bear the horror, the neighbor called the authorities himself. At 9:24 a.m. on November 23rd, 1995, a 911 call was finally made. Paramedics and the cops arrived within minutes. They found Elisa lying on the bed, Awilda in fear, and
5 other youngsters, dirty but unharmed, were found crying in the apartment. One of them led the firefighters to Elisa's body.
they rushed Elisa to Beekman Downtown Hospital. Doctors did everything they could, but it was too late.
Officially, 6-year-old Elisa Izquierdo died of child abuse syndrome. Her lifeless, emaciated body, every inch literally covered with bruises, found in the family apartment Tuesday morning by rescue workers responding to a 911 call.
The responding firefighter later recalled the moment that shook him to his core.
First question you ask as a first responder is, what happened? And the young girl just looked at firefighter Komorowski and said, nothing happened, she's just dead. Nothing wrong with her, she's just dead.
Think about that for a moment. A child so conditioned to violence and horror that death seemed normal. The investigators quickly realized they hadn't just found a tragedy, they'd found a horror that would shake New York.
So horrible. I wouldn't want to go into graphic detail, but just to say that she had cigarette burns and scars all over her torso and numerous deep contusions on both sides of her body.
Lieutenant Luis Gonzalez, who had seen countless cases like these in his 22 years of experience, said,
Well, in my 22 years of service, this has been the worst case of child abuse that I have ever witnessed.
The medical examiner's report documented over 100 separate injuries in various stages of healing. Burns from cigarettes and hot objects, bite marks, evidence of blunt force trauma to her head, chest, and abdomen. Her hair had been torn out in clumps. Several ribs were broken. There were signs of sexual abuse. But perhaps most disturbing was what the investigation revealed about the few months before her death. Awilda Lopez had kept a wooden stick in the apartment that she used to beat Elisa regularly. She forced the child to eat her own feces. She used to mop the floor using her hair. She threw her against walls with such force that neighbors could hear the impact through the concrete. Within 48 hours of Elisa's death, Awilda Lopez was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Her husband, Carlos Lopez, was charged as an accomplice for failing to protect the child.
Police are also holding the mother's live-in boyfriend for questioning. The remaining children have been turned over to child welfare.
The 5 surviving siblings, dirty, malnourished, but physically unharmed, were removed from the apartment immediately. Soon, the story was on every news channel in New York, and people were not able to believe what they saw and heard.
Elisa was killed here inside her 19th floor for almost 2 days until a neighbor discovered her badly bruised, lifeless body.
Just before the trial, Awilda Lopez gave a jailhouse interview to television host Rolanda Watts. Speaking from behind bars, she calmly insisted she wasn't to be blamed for Elisa's death.
Did you or did you not murder Elisa?
I did not murder my daughter.
You did not? What happened that night that Elisa died?
I came and I opened her mouth, right? When I tried to give her mouth to mouth and, pump her like that, but I know how to do, CPR, but I tried the best I could have.
What you're about to hear may be disturbing for some viewers.
Water was coming like out her mouth. When I would pump her like that, like water would come out. So then I put my hand like that in her hand. I didn't feel nothing. I put my ear in her heart and her heart wasn't beeping no more. And I told my son that she died. And then there, I just panicked. And then I came and I covered her with the blankets and the coats and everything, and I just kept drinking and saying she was gonna come back alive, and she never did. Then the night I cooked and everything, then the night came, and then I
cooked?
Yeah, I cooked and everything for the kids. And then the night came and nothing. And then I still sleeping while I slept in the bed.
This mother kept her dead baby laying there for 2 days without calling for any help, thinking that she would come back alive herself. And let me tell you, this wasn't even the worst part.
Their word is that you made her eat her own feces.
I never made her eat her own stuff. Never. Really did that to her.
There's also word that you did things like mop the floor with her hair.
I would mop the floor with my daughter's hair. Never.
Did you lock her up in her room ever?
But one day, but not locking her in there forever.
She did all of these horrible things to that poor child, and then tried to put blame on the teachers, neighbors, and her own husband.
Lopez had hit her right, before he went to jail.
You're talking about Carlos?
Yeah.
But Carlos was not even present at the home that time. He was in jail for violating his parole. She was such an addict that she didn't even realize she confessed it just a week ago to the cops.
You have on police videotape a confession that you killed your daughter, that for over a 7-week period you repeatedly penetrated her with a hairbrush, that her fingers were broken, bones sticking out of it, bruises all over her body, burns all over her face, and that you have a history of being a crack addict.
That's what they made me say.
Who made you say?
The cops.
The interview only fueled public anger. She became one of the most hated women in New York, a symbol of evil that the city could not forgive. Every person who watched felt a visceral pain imagining what that innocent child must have endured. The suffering, the terror, the betrayal. The thought of little Elisa's final moments brought the entire city to tears. Everybody wanted justice. But before justice could be served, the city had to bury a child.
The bitter cold, the dreary climate, seem to reflect the mood outside this old Catholic church in Bushwick, Brooklyn today. Inside the church, the closed casket of 6-year-old Elisa Izquierdo, hundreds of mourners, and a priest who asked for the mourners' compassion and understanding for Elisa's mother, Alwilda Lopez.
She is still one of us. The mother is still one of us, is still a child of God.
The priest asked everyone to forgive Alwilda. But how can you forgive someone who was a child of God, but had become a monster? But now she was finally laid to rest, reunited with her father in heaven, where no one could ever hurt her again.
Izquierdo's wake. Her friends, her family, even complete strangers. What they saw made grown men cry and women grasp their kids more tightly.
I have 2 kids myself, I'm really hurt.
The whole city was crying, and their hearts were heavy.
Was laid to rest at the Cypress Hill Cemetery in Brooklyn.
Elisa probably is looking at us gathered here with a confused mind and a guilty heart. Probably she has a forgiving smile for all our neglect, impotence, paralyzing poverty, choked anger, and the silent resignation.
She always loved the snow, this family friend said. It snowed last night. Now she is buried. It snowed for her.
As Elisa's small casket was lowered into the ground, covered by fresh snow, the city made a silent promise. Justice would be served. As the funeral ended, investigative reporters were just beginning to uncover the truth. And it was even more disturbing than anyone imagined. Remember those 22 reports to Child Protective Services? They weren't vague concerns. They were detailed, urgent warnings. Teachers documented bruises with photographs. The school principal personally called multiple times. Social workers filed formal complaints. Neighbors reported hearing screams. Every single one was either ignored, mishandled, or closed without proper investigation. The outrage was immediate. Protests erupted outside City Hall. Parents, teachers, and child welfare advocates demanded answers. Editorial boards across New York ran scathing pieces with headlines like, "Who failed Elisa?" and "Blood on their hands." Mayor Rudolph Giuliani ordered an immediate investigation into the Administration for Children's Services and addressed the public. The commissioner at the time resigned. Multiple caseworkers were suspended or fired.
The results of these investigations illustrate the inadequate casework on the part of both Elisa Izquierdo's caseworker and her supervisor. Today's action by the Administration for Children's Services marks a powerful step in the right direction for our city's child welfare system.
New Commissioner Nicholas Scopetta also spoke at the press conference.
It is alleged in the charges that the caseworker failed to conduct home visits, failed to keep adequate records, failed to perform in the way that he should have. Both the caseworker and the supervisor are suspended without pay. The maximum period of time that we can do that is for 30 days. We will institute the proceedings immediately, and we hope that we will have a prompt resolution.
By 1996, Mayor Giuliani declared that he would abolish the city's Child Welfare Administration and rebuild it from top to bottom. He said, "Nothing can bring Elisa back. It should be of some comfort that her death has served as motivation for bringing greater accountability to the child welfare system. Public was so furious and demanded death penalty for this monster.
Elisa's mother, Awilda Lopez, has been charged with murder. Governor Pataki says he would favor the death penalty.
This case brought up light to other cases as well. Elisa was not alone. She was only one of 54 children who died from abuse that year alone, with child welfare already handling 17 of those cases. It was a total shame for them. Elisa's death became the face of this epidemic because of how extreme her suffering was, because of the prince who had tried to save her, because of her father's desperate attempts to protect her. But there were dozens of other children, nameless to the public, who suffered similar fates in silence. On the day of the sentencing hearing, Awilda Lopez lost control and was shaking and sobbing in the crowded courtroom.
The prosecutor asked the judge to impose the maximum penalty. The defendant, Awilda Lopez, lost control, shaking and sobbing in the crowded courtroom. Judge Alvin Schlesinger showed not 1 ounce of sympathy for the mother.
The judge asked her if she had anything to say in her defense, and she kept on crying.
Elisa Izquierdo. The judge waited for the emotional outburst to end, then asked Lopez if she had anything to say to the court. After the statement, Lopez really lost it.
The judge also said that
I don't know what demons occupy this defendant, or did, or the kind of pain that she must have suffered in the past to bring her to what I consider rage.
Finally, on July 31st, 1996, the court sentenced Awilda Lopez to life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 15, a punishment that showed how serious her actions were and the need for justice. Also, Carlos Lopez, Elisa's stepfather. He was already in jail for a parole violation when Elisa died, but he had a known history of abusing her. On October 29, 1996, Carlos was sentenced to 3 years in prison for those earlier assaults as well. But you will be shocked to know that today Awilda is between all of you. She is roaming free. When Awilda Lopez became eligible for parole in 2010, the board denied her release. Petitions with thousands of signatures circulated, begging the system to keep her locked away. People who never even knew Elisa signed them, united in their demand. This monster must never walk free. But in 2022, something happened that no one expected. On April 19, 2022, Awilda Lopez walked out of Taconic Correctional Facility. The woman who tortured a 6-year-old child to death. The woman who forced her daughter to eat her own feces. The woman who mopped floors with her hair. She was released after serving just 27 years. Elisa would have been 33 years old today. She could have been a mother herself, a teacher, a doctor. Anything she wanted to be with that scholarship from Prince Michael. But Elisa never got that chance, and her killer still got that chance of freedom. Living somewhere in America, walking the same streets where people once mourned Elisa's death. Through this channel, we share these stories to shine a light on child abuse. Not just to tell what happened, but to remind us why it matters. The next time you hear about a child being mistreated, think of Elisa. And if a voice inside says, "It's none of my business," remember, silence is what allows these tragedies to happen. If we don't stand up for the voiceless, who will?